we're at a point where we're able to invent words so we can communicate to one another our mistakes and our findings. Get to long much time later to get a written word so the dead could speak to the living about what they learned. We're at a point where now there's an enormous amount of information. Just in my lifetime, we've gone in America from less than 1% of humanity to now over 60% of humanity enjoying a higher standard of living than that known, experienced, or dreamt of by any potentate when I was young. During that time, we doubled the population, so we've now actually 120-folded those who are living this higher standard, all through the doing more with less. And we've been mistaking that then by saying this is clever management. Nothing to do with clever management whatsoever, by which you distribute profits. I'm perfectly confident that humanity is not going to get anywhere unless the one thing humans have that's absolutely extraordinary is initiative. We have beautiful minds to discover principles and to take initiatives. But I see that when I was young, 95% of humanity were illiterate. Russia had 98% illiteracy, and within 15 years they changed that to well over 90% literate. We're going from humanity where all little individuals have been very ignorant, unaware of one another, badly conditioned reflexes, having to have leaders. But all of a sudden we're at a point where everybody's in the information. The exciting thing about this moment is every one of you, I find good vocabularies all around the world. When I was young, there were not good vocabularies at all. That came about through the radio and the television, where kids used to learn to talk the way their dad talked, and no longer did that. They began to talk the way the radio man did, and the people got their job in the radio got by the commonality of their diction and the size of vocabulary. There suddenly was a completely new distribution of vocabulary. I have been around the world 47 times. Amazing thing, everywhere around the world, I really can communicate. I found the knowledge around the world is extraordinary. We're at a point where the little individuals themselves, I said we are here in the universe for a function of our minds to discover principles. Our brains deal with the temporary, the beginning, special cases. Our minds deal with the generalized, the pure principles themselves. And I say that human beings then are what I consider to be a final examination. The economic systems are not being tested, the political systems are not being tested. Individuals themselves are being tested for their integrity. I'm going to the blackboard for a minute with you. By the way, this is the address if you want to get those maps. The only place you can get it because the map company is not interested. Those are all their plates. Now, I've given you a triangle. 1 times 1. 1 to the second power equals 1. 2 to the second power equals 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 3 to 3. 3 to the second power equals 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 4 times 4. 4 to the second power equals 16. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So you can say triangling instead of squaring. And every square is 2 triangles. Nature is always most economical. Nature is continually multiplying itself times itself. When nature multiplies itself times itself and to the second power, is she triangling or squaring? Answer me! Triangling. If you don't have the guts to go along with your experimental evidence, we're through. Really, that's all it's all about. And you get to do the same thing with the tetrahedron. I find you say tetrahedron instead of cubing. And there it is, the third power, clearly demonstrable in its tetrahedron. You can count them up. So nature then is tetrahedroning. She's obviously dealing with the basic energy. This is what quantum mechanics is all about. So, I say the big thing is we are now in this final examination to see whether human beings are going to stay on this planet or not, going to stay in the universe. Are we going to have the integrity, our own courage of individuals to go along with our experimental evidence? If we do, we're going to be able to solve many, many problems together. I was asked to spend pretty much of a day speaking to the Foreign Relations Committee of the United States Senate about 8 years ago. You can get the congressional record for the day. I was talking to them about then the fact that in all the things I've given you here today, man was originally deployed, remote from one another, not knowing about one another, and nature's integrating us all. The average walking distance of human beings is 1,100 miles a year. We're still walking as we did before the automobile. Same about 1,100 miles. But when we entered World War I, in the United States we were walking 1,100 and riding 300 miles. When it came out of World War I with a new mobilization on, by 1919 we were also riding 1,100 miles as well as walking 1,100. Since that time, the riding has just increased incredibly. We came into World War II, the average housewife was riding over 10,000 miles a year, as well as walking 1,100, and the average salesman 30,000. All the same human beings then covering more and much more space than they used to. We got to the point then where they used to be very remote in little local huddles. Now, same human beings are converging to do various things as we're doing here, to exchange metaphysical information. Same people deploying to ski or water ski or to go in archaeology or whatever you want to do. So same human beings do both. They pulse, sometimes they're converging, sometimes diverging, but covering enormous distances. I find that not only have I been around the world 47 times, I found I'm one of over 10 million people that have that kind of pattern. And it's a pattern which the young world, everybody's coming into being around the world is. Not just something very local. I see, here were all these metals which we melted up. We had then, time of World War I, the copper, of course, gold is a better conductor than silver next, copper next best. But copper was plentiful enough to be functionally employed. So when we got into the great Niagara Falls and water power, and then began having copper, time of World War I, we went then in from just the muscle of human beings and so forth, and animals into inanimate power, and particularly in the manufacturing getting into electrical power. In 1 year, in 1917, we mined, refined, and put to work more copper, not 1 year, than cumulatively mined and refined in all of history before. If you look at the production curve of copper, there's 1 year in 1917 just goes vertical cliff like that. But then, after the war was over, in contradistinction to wars before where you'd taken all the farm boys off the farms and trampled down the farms, and the war used up all their food, and everybody lost. But suddenly, after World War I, there was the copper still there, and Niagara Falls was still falling, and we had the electric powers, and the copper still conducting. The copper didn't go back in the mines and didn't rot. So we've had something very new going on. There's enormous production capability been introduced into human affairs. I can then point out, too, that the next thing that happened was after a certain amount of time, people who owned the mines were making enormous amounts of money, but suddenly scrap began to appear and very much bothered the copper mine owners because it was purer still than what you took out of the mines. Didn't have to have much re-refining. We got to the point then where I discovered that if we take all the different investments of copper in pipes, plumbing pipes, how much goes into automobiles, how much goes into airplanes, how much goes into all the different arts, we find the average of all of them comes back in every 22 years. Every 22 years, the copper comes around, and all the other metals do. All the metals come around every 22 years. Meantime, we've learned how to do very much more with the same. So every time metals come around, we take the greater know-how, give more and more performance, take care of more and more people, higher standards each time it comes around. So the metals, the scrap metal gets to be of absolute importance. It was interesting, incidentally, in that Club of Rome report a few years ago, they didn't know anything about scrap metal. Out of all of our steel today, about 70% is coming from scrap. Japan had no iron mines whatsoever. They simply took all the metal we fried out in World War II and started melting it up to make all the progress they did. Anyway, scrap is the essence today. And all the different nations are getting upset. Their own political say, don't let this come into my country, it's going to upset my thing and so forth. And so we have 150 blood clots. We have 150 animals on one ship, and each one then trying to stop flows of things to look out for its local economy. I could see then whether we're going to get there or not to exercise our option meant we had to have things really free for those scraps to really flow around. We couldn't have any of the national borders. I saw that all the nations had to go. They were absolutely logical for yesterday, but like an umbilical cord, they become obsolete. Couldn't be better than the time of functioning as umbilical cord.
Bucky, I wonder if this might be a place to stop and see if there are any questions from the audience.
Skipper, if I finish, you'll have no questions. I won't be long, I'll show you. I appreciate your question and saying it that way. I want you to listen to me, though, absolutely intently. Because we're really at this critical point where humanity is going to make it or not. I am the only person who can talk to you about that. I'm talking about the options you really have. I said to the Senate committee, I told them that all the nations are going to have to go, and going to have to go in 10 years, or humanity won't stay here. The most difficult of all the nations to go would be the United States. Dictators can make deals with other dictators without any reference to people. Or dictatorial parties, as Russia has, can make their own deals without reference to people. But in a democracy, the president takes the oath of office on the basis that he, number one, defends our sovereignty. They even talk about de-sovereignizing, be immediately impeached. So this is most difficult. So I said, nature, if she wants humanity to say, is going to probably do all kinds of things about, so you're going to see the United States going very rapidly. The Senate committee was in full, that's the time, Humphrey was there at that time. Percy was in the chair, and he said, can you give us then some idea of what kind of a government we're going to have? I said, yes, and here's what's going on. The Russians and the United States, being able to, trying to spy with one another, their satellites, develop most extraordinary sensitive equipment. We have sensors which at 100 miles out from the surface of the earth can differentiate between a lamb and a goat. To have that kind of capability, we have also some satellites can tell you today where the beef cattle on earth is. We have extraordinary, this is a new era. But we also discovered that human beings also have electromagnetic field, extraordinarily high frequency, and it's going to have something to do with our understanding telepathy one of these days. But anyway, we do have electromagnetic fields. And if we're feeling positive, it's positive. If we're feeling negative, it's negative. We're going to be having then ways of problems being well-known problems of humanity being aired at certain hours on the television, radio programs around the world, where we have like a city management, like a UN city management saying, we propose to do so-and-so regarding this. And you're going to get electromagnetic readouts. You're going to have the sensors picking up the readouts. You're going to know exactly what's, when you get to 70% of humanity says, I'm for it, you're going, then the management must undertake to do it. If they find that the world society was wrong, in no time at all, the readout will be that they're against what they did. You don't have any political scapegoating, and you'll change. And this is the very essence of Norbert Wiener's cybernetics. This is how you have automatic steering. There's no such thing. Nature hasn't any straight lines. She has only waves. And we have then here a very high frequency, more and more high frequency readout what society is for or against, and begin gradually get a little better course, little less mistakes. It'll accommodate that we were born to learn by trial and error. This will be the first democracy in history. Anyway, you imagine how important your computer is going to be, the integration of this kind of information. I can see that for digital, nothing could be more important that you're really in the place where humanity, this is going to be the language of humanity, finding out how to get on in the universe. I don't think, sir, I have, if you'd like to have some questions, it's okay. But I tell you, I have telephone. Like everybody else has telephone. I don't have a private. I get telephone calls at 3 and 4 and 5 o'clock in the morning. And people say, I'm calling you long distance. I say, do I know you? They say, no. I say, why are you calling me? They said, well, I have a very important question to ask you. I said, you must then assume that I have some answers. If I do have any answers, because 53 years ago, I decided never to ask anybody any questions again. I'm going to find out for myself. So if you want to learn something, I suggest you hang up. I want to come back to when I started with you today, when I launched on this program. I said I had to ask that question. We're going to do my own thinking about, did I have to acknowledge a greater intellect to be operating in the universe than that of humans? And I committed myself in absolute faith. I'm absolutely confident I would not be here talking to you today. I would not have the knowledge I have if I had not committed myself. I have absolute faith. The word God seems to be inadequate, but I have absolute faith in God. And I don't want to think about this as something extracurricular. It's of the essence. Thank you.